I was particularly drawn to the chapter about I'm so sorry. And the difficulty many of us have with saying those words.
Or even more difficult. Right? So,
No question.
look, here, I didn't create a genre. There are a lot of books about getting through painful experiences. There are hundreds of death and grief books. There are hundreds of divorce books. There are hundreds of books on addiction and abuse. I didn't create a genre. But what I did address in this book that I did not see addressed sufficiently elsewhere is this question of what do we do when we're the cause of pain, right? Not when we're the victim, which is its own set of issues. But what do you do when you're the betrayer, not the betrayed? Because that is its own kind of pain, and its own kind of guilt, and its own kind of shame, and its own kind of darkness. What then? How do we create a path for reconciliation, for wholeness, for a relationship of integrity, real integrity, when something has been broken? And even more than saying I'm sorry, which any husband can tell you is woefully inadequate. Because
If they can say I'm sorry.
And if we do say it, it's never I'm sorry. There's always a commentary.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if you think I meant that.
Right.
I'm sorry you feel like
I didn't realize.
Yeah, right. I'm sorry has a lot of wiggle room.
Oh, yes, it
right?
does, yes.
So there's a piece in the book called Hurt and Run.
Which I was going to get to.
Yeah, and in it,
Yeah.
I do my best to convince all of us to go beyond I'm sorry, to say what I believe are the three most difficult words for human beings to say. It's much more difficult than I'm sorry, which are, I was wrong. I was wrong. That is a much higher degree of culpability, of responsibility, and there's no ambivalence in that, and there's no ambiguity in that. You own it, and by the way, it has to be said out loud. I was wrong. It changes everything. It takes the sting out right away. Now, there's more work to do after that, of course.
No question. That is such a powerful statement. And you give two examples in that particular chapter that you just referenced, where, sadly, two different drivers were responsible for the death of a person.
Yeah.
And how one driver handled it by basically trying to deny and
Hit and run. It was hit and run.
Say
She
hit
left a
and run.
25-year-old kid on Chautauqua in the middle of the night to die in the street, like a dead squirrel. And another driver, this isn't in the piece, another driver drove past him, saw him, stopped, dragged his body off into the bushes, and then kept going. This is true. It's a true story.
Wow. So I want to talk about that first example and then talk about the second example. So the first example is the authorities identify the driver, they locate the car, they see the damage on the car, and begins an investigative process. Walk us through a little bit about that.
So this young man happened to be one of my son's closest friends, and this was a very powerful learning experience for that whole group of kids. Anyway, this kid went out, knew he was going to be drinking, chose not to drive but to walk, and walked home at 3 in the morning, and he was hit and killed by a driver who worked at the post office, and she was on her way to work the 4 o'clock to noon shift or whatever it is. And it was hit and run. And despite constant appeals in the media, the newspaper, everything else, they never came forward. They tampered with evidence, repainted the car, etc. Good. Okay. And this is a family I'm, close to, Temple family. It was hell for these parents. The fact that it was hit and run amplified the volume of that hell to the nth degree. we go through the whole process of the funeral. There were 1,700 people at this kid's funeral. And I was at the sentencing hearing where the father spoke to the judge at the sentencing hearing. His sentencing statement is in the book, where he talks about what this family had done was left them with nothing but pain management every day. Every day is pain management. And the police have a recording of this woman and her husband when they were in the interrogation room, not realizing they were being recorded. If you ever need that knowledge later, you should be aware. You're being recorded even when the cops leave the room. And she said to her husband, just lie. Just lie about everything. So this was her approach after committing this mistake. I won't even call it a sin. The sin was the cover-up. The accident was exactly that, an accident. Now, we go to the second case.
So, but I just want to continue that thread. So, obviously, the judge sentenced the
driver
very significantly.
Well, not as significantly. These penalties, by the way, are not that significant. The maximum was 4 years. The judge gave her 3, which means she'll be out. She was out in a year and a half.
So imagine what it was like. So let's think about for a moment what it was like for the family who lost their son.
What it's still like.
What it's,
okay.
No question.
What it's still like.
So the second story that you share is, again, a driver who was answering a text, or dropped her phone.
Exactly.
Dropped her phone as she was driving, bent down to reach it, and inadvertently ran into an elderly man.
An 80-year-old man in a crosswalk in the Palisades.
Yes. So from there, what happens? And
right,
the
so
difference?
she's fumbling for her phone. She has her 10-year-old son in the car with her, who hasn't fumbled for their phone. And she hits this 80-year-old man in the crosswalk who was doing exactly what he was supposed to be doing. She was not. She pulls over. She gets out. She runs to him. Paramedics, police, etc. Statements. She calls the hospital and asks if she can visit every day. Family says no. She calls on the third day, and there's a police officer there who answers and says, "You better get a lawyer, he just died." And she was looking at very significant jail time. She went through the criminal trial, the civil trial. The widow, the wife of this man, went to the judge and said she did not want the mother of 3 children going to jail. So there were, I think, 800 hours of community service, big fines, etc. She does it all. And then I get a call. By the way, the widow is a Holocaust survivor. I get a call. Rabbi, tell me. The woman who killed Bill has asked to meet with me to seek my forgiveness. Do I have to meet with her? I said, you do. She said, will you go with me? I said, I will. And I met with Helen and her son before the meeting with this woman who had killed her husband. Because I wanted to prepare them, and I wanted to share something with them that I thought was important. I talked to them about the Rambam's steps for achieving teshuvah, of repentance and reconciliation. And I said to her, you know, Helen, when a person is truly sorry, apologizes out loud, changes his or her life, and puts a structure around them so that they can never do the same thing again if given the opportunity, as in this case with the phone in the glove compartment. If you are asked to forgive that person 3 times and you refuse, the sin is then upon you. So I just want you to be aware of that before this meeting happens. So it's the day of the meeting. I'm in my office at the Koreatown Temple. This thin, pale, frightened wisp of a woman shows up in the waiting area. I bring her into my office and I tell her, you know, I've prepared them and I think this is going to go well, and I'm sure it's going to go better than you think it's going to go. Because we all catastrophize. There's a piece in the book about catastrophizing and how terrible that is for us. Anyway, in walks Helen and her son Bobby, who's an enormous guy, really big guy, former sharpshooter in the Israeli army. Four of us sit down. And this woman, whose name is Candy, starts. I changed the names in the book. Her real name was Candy. She would not mind me saying it. And she says to them, I'm so sorry for what I did. I was wrong. And I've done everything I can. I go to high schools and talk about the dangers of texting and driving. I've done all these hours, 800 hours of community service. I speak wherever I'm asked to speak. I was wrong. Please, can you forgive me? And Bobby says, can I ask you one question? And she said, yes. And he looked at her and he said, how's your son? He was so scared that day. And that's when I knew that the healing had begun. That the barometric pressure in the room changed. It was a physical feeling, and it was the most remarkable thing I've ever seen. And she said, he's okay, he's better. He'll never be the same, but better. And then Helen gets up, walks over to this one, cups her face in her hands, looks at her, and she says, God bless you, and kisses her. And we're all, I'm crying, we're all weeping. We're just weeping. And that is the difference between just lie about everything and
deny, lie, deny, right.
Versus, I was wrong. Please forgive me. I've done everything I can. She even went to Bill's grave and asked for his forgiveness at his gravesite. So this is this section of the book about, and we all have this in our family. I say in the book, we don't hit and run, but we all hurt and run. We've all left someone else's feelings behind like roadkill. All of us. And it doesn't have to stay that way. And I'm not a fool. There are some things that are broken that can never be made more beautiful. I know that. But many can.
And forgiving is not about forgetting. That's another
Exactly.
point you make.
I say that too.
Yeah.
You are not obligated to forget. Forgiving is not the same as forgetting. Forgiving doesn't ask amnesia of us at all. In fact, remembering is often a powerful way of, even a little guilt, I think is, you know how when your kids were little and you went bowling and they put up those things in the gutters, right? What do they call?
Bumpers.
Bumpers, right? So I think of a little guilt, a little shame, and a little remembering as sort of bumpers, so that if you're about to get out, if you're about to veer off course again, they kind of, I do not want to live that life again. I do not want to be that person again. I do not want to live with that lack of integrity again. And so I think some of it, forgetting, I think, would be missing out on one of the important bumpers in life.